Welcome. I'm Analysis Paralysis. I play Magic the Gathering. Today we're going to talk about my fundamental draft strategy guide. Let's dive in. Fundamental draft strategy. It's fun. You get to evaluate cards, try them in your deck, explore different cards and how they work together, and you get to build a new deck every time. But also, drafting is kind of difficult. You have to just, try. So, I think it's, a bit daunting. This is my attempt to not reinvent the wheel, but give you my fundamental draft strategy guide. And if it's useful, great. I hope that you as a beginner can an okay first draft, a good 10th draft, and I hope that you will have a confident 20th draft. Okay, let's dive in. An old misconception is that drafting is about being lucky. If you draw the right cards, you win. If you draft the right cards, you win. This does not hold up over time. Some players repeatedly are able to construct very powerful decks that have a good opportunity to win against other decks. Okay. Synopsis, the table of contents, how to draft good cards, what to look for. I will talk about well-crafted deck looks like. We'll talk a little bit about being a good pilot of the deck. It's an important skill, no matter the format you play. Lastly, we'll do analysis. I don't know what I meant with something win. I thought it sounded catchy. I'm talking about post-game analysis, asking the right questions there. First of all, what's in the box? What's in a draft booster? As a beginner, you'll love these really flavorful rare cards. They'll look awesome, but the problem is there's so few of them. You will probably see 3, sometimes a bit more, but 3 rare cards in your draft. So you can't create a 40 card deck around 3 cards. Uncommons and commons are the cards you're looking for. The commons and the uncommons are the ones that will win you the matches, that win you the games. You can even create decks without rares and still win a lot of games. Besides looking for common and uncommon cards, most of the time you're looking for a removal card. Secondly, you're looking for good spells, creature spells. That's where we start. And there's an old abbreviation was called BREAD, and that was bombs, removal, and then they had some other things. The old approach was to draft the great cards over removal, and then Louis Scott Vargas and Marshall reinvented the bread and made it into keto. And they are talking about kill spells and efficient creatures. The takeaway for me here is just removal, creatures. That's a great start for a beginner. So besides removal and creatures, we need some other kind of plan, some other kind of draft strategy. And there are 2 schools of thought. And these different schools are basically trying to answer the question, how can you successfully navigate the draft and get good cards? One approach is to just come into the draft with a made-up mind. I'm going to draft red and black. That's the plan. I'm going to force it. I'm going to take it. That's called drafting the easy way. It simplifies the draft because in every pack you're looking for the best card in these 2 colors. And when it works really well. But there's another approach, and that is called drafting the hard way. And when you're drafting the hard way, you're not asking yourself which card is best in my deck. You're asking yourself which card is best. And you're trying to take the best card in every pack. And if you're a beginner like me, you will usually try to pivot into a color, a main color, or maybe a dual color combination quite early. It could be the first pack, the 5th pick, or in the end of the first pack. But even if you're drafting the hard way, you're trying to go into a color combination quite early. And there's no right and wrong here. Sometimes a certain color will stand out because it will be packed with efficient creatures and kill spells. Players who draft this color will win more. And in that case, forcing that color will be a good approach. Other times, a certain color combination will be really successful. I'm talking about, for me, the strongest example was the black-red combination in Adventures in the Forgotten Realms. Because black had lots of kill spells. Small creatures that let you sacrifice another creature. And red had kill spells or burn spells, efficient creatures, and something that let you steal an opponent's creature. And this gave you the opportunity to steal and sack your opponent's creatures. And that made it so that the decision to force black-red in Adventures of the Forgotten Realms were often a successful strategy. And other times, when it's more evenly matched, like all the 5 colors are equally okay, and there's no color combination that is standing out, then it can be more efficient to try to end up in a lane where no one else is drafting. And I know Paulo, he says that he's trying to get a feel for which colors are flowing. And he wants to navigate the draft so that he ends up in a lane where he can take more of the great cards. Because if you're the only one in a pod of 8 players that are drafting blue-white, you get to take more of the good cards from that color combination. And if other people are competing color combination, they will all have bad decks. But you, by drafting the hard way, can end up in a lane that is more accessible. And thus have a much stronger deck. Deck designers, what they do nowadays is that they create something that are called signpost uncommons. These uncommons are saying, try this or do this. Here are games to be won. And that could be something, it's usually a card that has 2 colors. It could be like a black-red spell. And the takeaway could be like, okay, black and red is a thing. Okay. And maybe the thing is vampires. So that's a tribe of creatures that will probably work well together. So the vampires are a thing. Maybe we should gather the tribe and see where that takes us. And this theme or this archetype, the vampires will, for instance, create blood tokens. Blood tokens, what are they doing? I don't know. Let's try it. So that could be an approach. And if you get a feeling that a certain uncommon is a strong card, that could be a signal that this color combination is open for you. So if a card like this is passed your way late in the draft, it's a strong signal that that color combination could be open. Reading signals is important, and understanding that you can learn about these different themes by reading the uncommons. And if you know a good example of a signpost uncommon, hit me up. Give me a good example in the comments. Right, so what is an archetype? It's a theme. It's a theme that usually means cards of this type work well together. And if you get loads of them, good things will happen. For instance, in this set, Crimson Vow, vampires are a thing. They create blood tokens, and it could be a strong archetype, it could be a weak theme, we'll see. But it's just a design decision from the designers that you can go in a certain direction and be a bit more successful than if you just took all kinds of cards. For instance, yesterday I drafted zombies, humans, vampires, and wolves, and these cards did not work so well together. They were kind of weak on their own, and I lost 3 games and won 1. I just know, as a beginner, if you can end up with lots of cards from the same tribe or the same color combination, most of the time it's going to be a good idea. And some themes will be more easy to craft than others. And we're back now again to my favorite example of AFR, the black-red. And you can create this steel sack theme with just 1 or 2 steel spells and just 3 sack outlets. And if you had these 5 cards, that was enough to make the 2 card combo to go off. So it was quite easy to assemble. And well, one part of that was that they made the key cards, the Deadly Dispute and the Price of Loyalty, the common cards. They would be really plentiful. And other times the themes are more difficult to assemble. I know that in the beginning of a format, people will have the same lack of knowledge of which themes work. But as the seasons go on, some players will have an advantage because they will know which themes are more successful or easy to assemble, or they will know when they can go for a certain theme. And in the latest part of the draft, there will be these really successful drafters that are still in the game they know exactly what they're doing. Me, I don't know what I'm doing, so Crimson Vow for me is a difficult format. Alright, so an archetype is a theme. It's probably oftentimes about a tribe of creatures, and they're oftentimes connected to these uncommons. Alright, and I was mentioning that when you navigate the draft, you're asking yourself questions. The hard drafter is asking which card is the best card in the pack. Easy drafter is asking themselves which card is the best card in my colors. But either way, at the mid or the late section of the draft, you're asking yourself which card is best in my deck. Because just taking the best card will sometimes not win you games, because sometimes you're looking for that kind of synergy, or sometimes you have enough 2-drops to be, that's all you need. So you need, even if it's not as good 6-drop or 5-drop, you need some of these heavy cards. So a weak 6-drop is probably better than no 6-drop. I assume you want your deck to look in a certain way. You want some cards to be able to play some cards in the later parts of the game where you have more mana. And if you're stuck on these 2-drops, you're gonna regret it. So sometimes taking the best card for your deck is not the best card raw power wise. And maybe I will learn to answer that third question as I draft more. And maybe you will do too. I hope you will. But I know it's an important question. Okay, moving on. Talked about navigating the draft, right? Now we're going to talk about what a good deck, what it looks like, and how to approach it. Okay, so what we're looking at here is the ideal draft deck mana curve. It's light in the 1-drop slot. It's quite few, but there's some. It's jam-packed of things in the 2-drop slot. And this is due to the fact that we want a few of these in the deck so we can get one of them or two of them in our starting hand, so that we have a play for our second turn. And then fewer and fewer creatures the higher you go on the curve. And typically you have 16 creatures and 7 spells. And in my opinion, if you can get 3 of these non-creature spells to be removal, you're in a good place. Which cards go into my deck? Well, we're almost back to the point where we're talking about removal and creatures. But it's a variation. You want strong cards, and that could either be a removal card is almost going to be strong. An impactful and efficient creature is in the same category, but you're also looking for these cards with synergy. And did I misspell synergy? It looks so wrong. How do you spell synergy? Well, Wikipedia says it's correct, but it looks wrong to me. Okay, so you're looking for cards that synergize, that go well together. So the cards that go into your deck are the cards that have that work with this mana curve, the smooth mana curve, and that either are strong on their own or synergize or work well together. Ideally, that's the cards we're looking for to craft. All right, lands though. Ideally, or typically, you're going to have 17 lands. And if you have a cheaper deck with less expensive creatures, for cheaper decks, you can go with 16 land. I just don't recommend that you go 18 lands. For me, that is advanced draft strategy. So 17 typically. Start there. And if you craft a deck with the ideal mana curve, you can end up with a 1-drop on your first turn, 2-drop in your second turn, a 3-drop in your third turn, and on your fourth turn, either a 4-drop or 2-2-drops. I claim that Magic is just math and decision making with extra steps. And if you're crafting a deck with the ideal mana curve, it increases the chances, the probability that you'll get a starting hand that will let you do something like this. And even if it's a weak deck, like it doesn't have creatures that worked well together and the power level of the cards are quite low, you will threaten your opponent and force them to react to you, and offense is oftentimes what will win you the game. So it's just, this is what we're looking for as beginner drafters. Yeah, drafting, navigating the draft, creating a decent deck. And now we're moving over to piloting the deck. Okay. The first plan that we're going to stick to, like beginner plan, play your creatures, you use your removal to answer the opponent's creatures, you attack your opponent and their life total, boom, you win. And it's a simple plan, and when it works, it's nice. It's a good game plan. A variation could be that you play your creatures and somehow removal is not in your hand, or maybe they have threats that let them play around removal. And then you hope to survive and draw your really impactful cards. And then you win. When they can't handle your cards and they just have to lose, they have to concede. Or they play it out and you win guaranteed. So these two paths to victory are, I like them. And when these two plans don't work, I generally become stressed. And then you have to do something else. And one plan could be to play around opponent's removal. So don't play your most impactful creatures at the first opportunity. It's typical of beginners to play their most powerful cards at the first opportunity. But it's often, not always, it's often better to take a more measured approach. So you're hoping to trade your opponent's removal spells for weaker cards, so that your really impactful cards can stick. Okay. We talked about having 7 spells, and a few of them, hopefully half, will be removal. That means that we can't answer all of our opponent's 17 creatures with removal. It just doesn't work. So our opponent will try to bait removal with their creatures and try to play their bombs when you spend your removal spells. So we try to play around their removal spells, and we try to ration our removal spells so that we can use it when we need it and not wasting them needlessly. Okay, and thirdly, we're looking for opportunities. And this, I'm a beginner, so my eye for opportunities will be on my level. And as you progress, your eye for spotting weakness or sensing when it's the right time to attack will only increase. But you're trying to get a feel for when the opponent is vulnerable to an attack, when it's time to play a big spell, or when the game is coming down to a race where you both are trying to get each other down to 0. And if you can sense that it's getting time to race, what can I do this turn that puts me in a position to win in a few turns down? Or my opponent is about to assemble a really strong combination of board presence that is really impactful and hard to handle. What cards do I need to take out to stop their plans? And I would really like to recommend you to look at my quick draft of Kaldheim, because at one of my matches, I will here. You will have a link to that game where I have 5 creatures in play, and one of them is a lord that made all the other creatures more powerful. They all got +1/+1. And I blocked my opponent's creatures and they had open mana. And at the worst time, my opponent removed my lord and managed to wipe all of my 5 creatures by only dying with one of their creatures. So they got 5 of my creatures for 2 of their cards. And that was an excellent trade, and I couldn't recover. So you're looking for these kinds of opportunities where you can use your removal at maximum efficiency. Efficiency. All right. What else? Well, that is my take on piloting. I don't know more. So we tried to navigate the draft, create a good deck with a decent curve. We tried to pilot it, and now we're going into the post-game analysis. So know this. You're looking at 50% win rate. You're going to win half the time. And if you're winning more than 50%, that just means that you're going to rise through the ranks and face more skilled opponents. And then your skill rate will level again. So my first advice is to learn to handle loss emotionally. Take a break. Don't play on tilt. And if you're getting paranoid that the shuffler is out to get you, it's not out to get you. It's math. It's math. You will have an average hand or an average sequence of cards most of the time. A few times you will have the perfect hand or the perfect draw. And a few times you can have the worst draw ever. The worst hand, and it will just be crappiest thing ever. And this is not by design, this is just probability, and that kind of probability is called variance. So even the best players are unlucky, and that is probably why they level out at around 70 to 80% win rate, because their ability to navigate the draft, craft a good deck, and pilot those cards are so strong that they win 70% of the time, or 80%. But they don't win 100 because it's not all skill, it's also luck. Alright, that was the first lesson. Secondly, because there's going to be a lot of losing, we're hoping to lose to better decks and better pilots that we can learn from. We're hoping that we're not losing from bad plays or crappy decks. And we're hoping that we have meaningful questions to ask ourselves after a match or after a draft, so that we learn. So it's not just, well, that was a loss, move on. Because, yeah, that doesn't help us at all. The plan worked. GG. Now what? I'm going to analyze the game. What cards performed, right? Did they do what we tried to set out to do? What kind of mistakes did I make? Did I make the game unnecessarily even or close from bad plays? Was there another line of play, a way that I could have won more easily? What did my opponent do that I could learn? Right? And did I make a good decision whether to keep my cards or to mulligan? I mean, I don't think there's a lot to be learned from winning. Your game plan worked, so just move on and get into the next game. But when you're losing, something went wrong, okay? Right? What? So this is a post-mortem autopsy. Was it bad luck? Were we unlucky when we navigated the draft, or were we, is it a bad deck? Did we draw only lands or no lands? Did we face off against a perfect counter to our deck? I think these all come, aside from drafting, piloting a deck and being unlucky, that's okay. But were we reckless with the removal? Did we spend it too late, so we died? from a small creature that just chipped away, or were we too wasteful and we ended up without removal spells when we needed them? Okay, so timing of removal. Did we block into open mana when we thought that they had something? Or did we attack into open mana when we thought that they had something? Like, your opponent is rationing their removal. Are they having those cards in hand? Or are they having something else? So, you need to ask yourself, is this a good attack or a good block? And try to figure out if you have a good answer. And sometimes the opponent might be bluffing. Sometimes you're trying to bluff your opponent that you have something that will counter. So there's a time and place for bluffing. Yeah, and if your opponent has never played any removal spells and you attack into or block into open mana, I think partly that is on you. Like if there's a strong chance that you're gonna run into a combat trick or a removal spell and you don't have a plan to handle that, then you need to think about what kind of cards your opponent is holding in their hand. You can only see the backside, but you need to think about what they're holding and see if you can play around a certain card. Maybe you had a path to victory and you just missed it because you were stressed out. You had analysis paralysis. Analyzing the deck, like the post-mortem deck, when you're analyzing your loss. Did I miss the path to victory? Don't worry about it. It's a lot of Magic is complex, so you're trying to ask yourself questions that so you can improve over time. And maybe you really didn't have any playables in your starting hand and you kept it and now you lost. That's on you. You need to mulligan bad starting hands. Alright, that was Analysis Paralysis Fundamental Draft Strategy Guide. And I hope you found some parts here that you can use to improve. Just remember, try. Navigate the draft, craft the deck, pilot it with the best of your abilities, and ask the right questions. And if you divide this big clunky challenge that drafting is into smaller, more bite-sized and digestible problems, then they might be more solvable. And for me, that's a promise of better days. It's something that gives me a little bit of hope that I can improve. And I hope that you found it useful and that you improve as well, and that we'll just have awesome matches against each other. And then win or lose, we'll learn and hopefully have fun. And if you liked it, give it a thumbs up. Maybe consider subscribing. That would help me a lot. And watch out for my next content. And this is Analysis Paralysis, signing off.